Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. This episode is powered by Dr. Ray Gorman, founder of Engage Movement. Learn how to boost your income without relying on sessions. Get a free training on the blended practice model by following at Ray Gorman DPT on Instagram. Brandon, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today, man. Huge shout out to our guy Fahey for getting us connected there, man. Burn the ladders. For people who aren't familiar with you or the incredible work you're doing in Pennsylvania that way, would you mind filling them in a little bit about yourself, man?
Okay, my name is Brandon Byrd from Byrd Sports Performance. I've been in the game probably about 23 years now. So it's right around 2002, right out of college. Went to the University of Pittsburgh. I played football and ran track. My performance coach at Pitt was Buddy Morris. Buddy Morris at the time was, by 1998, was learning from a guy named Louis Simmons in Columbus, Ohio, owner of Westside Barbell. So he introduced to that type of methodology training. And then brought in Charlie Francis to train us too. So I kind of was, I became a really good athlete from the training. So I said, man, I wish I had this type of stuff in high school. Or, if I would have had this in high school, I would have had a bazillion offers. But so, nevertheless, I went home and I put into practice. My first two kids one went to Florida State, one went to Wake Forest. I said, man, there's something to this. And so I began training, I helped my buddy out, started his own gym up, build it up. Then I went on my own for about 2016. And then now I'm evolving every year and I'm constantly learning. And I do speed. I couldn't really sport football, baseball, softball, basketball. I got some ice hockey. I got lacrosse. I'm in swimming, volleyball. Might do it all. I got a girl, Kenzie, she might make a little ice skating. I got track and field state champions. I got football D1. I just go on and on. But I do also do a lot of, people realize I do a lot of rehab too. So like my kids get hurt. Well, here's another thing too. Louis Simmons in the mid 90s got a phone call and said, you need to try these bands on the bar. I said, these chains. And he's like, where the hell do I find bands? And so Dick Hartzell came to Ohio at the Arnold, trying to, do demonstrations. And he tried the bands out. He goes, I need to get these bands, dude, but we're going to make you a amount of money. And so they started experimenting these bands. And that's where, the Russians did this years ago, chords and bands and stuff, but like nobody knew how to do it. So, Hartzell was kind of doing it. So they kind of like experimented with it. And he was a great rehab guy. And so I met Dick. I flew Dick Hartzell out to train me. I wanted to learn how his thoughts on flexibility and mobility and rehab. And so that's a part of my practice as well. So like sometimes parts of this, like in the spring season, when I got these track kids, I'm like rehabbing. That's all I'm doing with pretty much, with the Dick Hartzell stuff. But at the same time, those bands make you elastic and explosive too. So that's kind of another thing. Way I learned through them. So that's where it kind of changed the game with those bands. People don't realize Dick Hartzell invented the bands by Jump Stretch USA back in Ohio from Northeast Ohio, but that was probably like somewhere in the early 90s, 80s, I think it was. So that man was brilliant.
Oh, 100%.
I was lucky to learn of the brilliant coaches.
100%, man. You've been around some of the best, and now you're having just a phenomenal impact on the athletes that you worked with. And as you mentioned and alluded to that way, unfortunately, athletes have a tendency to get hurt sometimes and injured.
I'll never forget. Dick walked in the gym.
Yeah,
he's like 75. People don't realize he told us a story. He used to be an NFL kicker. He goes, Bird, I'm at Disney World, and one of the kids goes, can you kick the ball for me? He goes, oh, sure. So he kicked the ball, and he tore his quad. Like right there. He never saw a doctor or surgeon. He healed it by himself. I was like, what? And then he came, what really got me, I'm watching a video on YouTube. There's a guy that had ACL surgery the day before. He was working on him. he's going up steps and down like the day walking with no brace, no crutches. I'm like, I gotta beat. I know him about me. I gotta beat him. And so he comes to the gym. He goes, Bird, this is a true story. I was in the stands at a football game. He carries this up around with him. The quarterback got hurt, rolled his ankle. They carried him off the field. He went down. This is the end of the first quarter. He went down to the field, worked out his ankle. The guy went back in the game and never missed one play. I said, that's amazing.
That's crazy.
I was so flexible. But there's other thing too. He goes, Bird, I can squat 600 pounds. I said, what? You're 75 years old. He puts all these bands on his shoulders and he's 600 pounds of band. He's squatting bands. And then he did a full split. He dropped in a full split. I'm like, this is incredible. So I said, I got to learn you. Like, you just tell me all you know. So that was my Dick Hartzell introduction.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, exactly. And again, unfortunately, weak things break. That's a huge West Side principle. And that's one of the many things that I love about West Side is it's like, hey, look, we're going to find whatever that weakest link is and we're going to blow it up. We need it to be strong. We need the body to be resilient. So again, unfortunately, we can't avoid every single injury that happens, but we can certainly make the body as close to bulletproof as possible. So if something does happen, you're going to come out better on the other end because of how strong you came into that, if that makes sense. And the other piece, obviously, I think anytime someone says West Side, they immediately think of Conjugate, right? There's a whole educational platform that they have literally called the Conjugate Club, right? And I think the Conjugate method is something that can really easily apply to rehab, whether that's, non-operative or even post-operative patients, especially, late stage ACL or late stage of some of these other lower extremity injuries. I think the Conjugate method applies insanely well. For people who aren't familiar with the Conjugate method, I'm assuming some rehab providers, this is going to be their first time hearing about it that way, especially if they're not familiar with the work of Louis and the guys that way. Would you mind filling in a bit more about what the Conjugate method is and what that looks like on the typical, week to week that way, if you will?
So basically back in I think I would say the mid 1900s, the Russians would, it started in rehab actually.
Yeah.
Because they would do, people were injured and they would actually they would do some strengthening and the people would be sore and they would go down and they would supercompensate and they go up, and that's where supercompensation came. It came from rehab actually. And so then they started doing block training. You would train this, you would start out doing building strength, building muscle and building strength, and then they'd go into explosive strength and then accumulation phase and stuff like that. And so back in, I think it was Yuri Vereshevsky, actually, he wanted to train all the aspects of abilities at one time. Like they thought you could just work on flexibility at one time. You could work muscle at one time. You could work on speed one time, mobility, suppleness. But he came with an idea, I want to do that all at one time. They thought it was crazy. But really, if you don't do that, the body forgets what it's learned. Like you work on strength in a 1 month, and then you work on building muscle 1 month, and then you leave that month and do work on strength. Now you lose the muscle you just built, and then you go to a speed block and you lose the muscle and the strength you built. So the idea of the Conjugate is building and working all those abilities at the same time, and so. Now, like when I rate high school programs, it's always, a good program, a high school, it could be any good program. It's got to be, you got to build strength, you got to build muscle, you got to build speed. Well, strength is max effort method. Speed is dynamic effort. And then repetition method is building muscle. And then there's explosive strength, that's building explosiveness. And then pure speed is running. And so that's what the Conjugate is. You're working on all the things at the same time. And not only that, you're rotating exercises and intensities. Those are the intensities I spoke about. And then the intensities are basically based on the force velocity curve. People don't realize your actual strength is moving, putting maximum force at zero velocity. That's isometrics. And that's a very valuable thing. When you're actually lifting the weight to move it, you have to apply a little more force than what's on the bar. It's near max, but not your true max. But actually, a lot of the pro teams, they test your maximal strength with a mid thigh pull on a force plate. You're pulling as hard as you can, and the bar ain't moving. And so you move down the chain, down the chain from max effort. Dynamic effort is intermediate weights and fast velocities. Strength speed is weights, fat is slow as heavy weights. It's kind of slow velocities, and isometric is no velocity. Heavy weights is zero velocity. You go down the train, it gets faster and faster, the velocities, and that's kind of what it is. You're rotating, and then you're rotating exercises too, because the body has so many different movement patterns, joint angles. There's hip joint angle, knee joint angle. You're trying to do single joint exercises, which is to fix all these issues, these problems that arise, these sticking points, so to speak. Because really, you can't. What stops you from movement is a weakness, and ultimately that weakness will actually end up being an injury. Possibly, it's usually an injury. Waiting to happen. Because weak things will break. Because the body is smart. It actually compensates for the weaknesses around it. The other parts will work harder to compensate the weaker parts, and those are the things that usually break. You have a hamstring that's injured. The other hamstring is going to start to overwork to compensate for the other hamstring. So that's why the conjugate, working on those abilities and all those strengths and intensities all at the same time, you have a well-rounded athlete. And so that's basically the conjugate system in a nutshell. And I think it's superior to anything. I mean, it's just, but the main thing, when I rate programs, you got to have those things. Again, as long as you have those things in there, you don't have to be totally conjugate, fully blown, but you got to build muscle repetition method. You got to have some max effort, and you got to have some dynamic effort, and you got to have some speed and included in it. At that point, you have some, and then there's contractions too. There's eccentric. Obviously, there's concentric. There's isometric too. Those eccentric in loading is a great way to build strength, and isometric is almost the best way to build strength. Because you can push 50% more force in isometrically than you can with concentrically. So and you can handle 40% more eccentrically. So you can build robust muscles and build muscle damage and build more robust muscles that eccentrically. So all those things are used in the rehab world. So I rotate those all the time in my conjugate system. There's all those things I'm talking about is working on all the abilities at the same time to avoid injuries. It's like Nick Chubb. The running back for the Cleveland Browns, formerly, super strong, but he got hit in the knee, dislocated his knee. He should have torn everything in his knee, but I think he came away with like dislocation, but no real ACL tear. It's because he squats 700 pounds.
Right, exactly.
A player that is a nationally ranked soccer player, the goalie came out, took her knee out. That would have been a normal girl. She would have tore MCL, ACL. But she just sprained her knee. She's back in like 6 weeks. But that's because I had built her up. She's robust. A lot of these athletes are really out of shape because they have weaknesses that haven't been found yet. A lot of coaches don't identify these weaknesses. That's what the conjugate is that trains you to do. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, you identify weaknesses, you exploit them, and you turn weaknesses into strengths, right? And there's a few things that you touched on that I really want to build on. I mean, first off, as you mentioned, it originated in Soviet-era Russia that way, and it was kind of a rehabilitation sense that way. And a lot of the work they were doing at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was high volume in nature, and they didn't always expose people to the 100% plus load, right? It was more of that typical high volume kind of training, but it did have, as you mentioned, max effort, dynamic effort, a GPP element, and so on that way. And there's also a conjugate system, I believe, that came out of the Bulgarians that involved more of like almost like daily max out, for my understanding, if you will. So it's like, there was some different extreme examples out there of where this originated, but the general principle of, weak things break and we have to find your weaknesses and turn them into strengths holds true. And I think the other piece, as you mentioned, the constant rotation of exercises, rotating stimuli, rotating intensities, and also accessories, right? As you mentioned, you do your main thing, you find that weak spot in the main thing, and then you blow that up. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about 20%, roughly, give or take, of the sessions are going to be your main thing, squat, deadlift, bench, whatever. The other 70, 80%, a lot of that is the accessories that go into building up that weak spot within that main thing. Ultimately we keep the main thing, but if there's a certain spot in the squat that you're really, really bad at, we're not going to magically make that better by only squatting. It's like, hey, look, there's muscles that, are not working like they should in that range. How do we blow those muscles up? How do we make them bigger? How do we make them stronger? How do we make them more robust? And the other thing I really want to harp on that you didn't actually bring up, which is beautiful, is a lot of rehab providers I talk to say, well, the weight is heavy or the weight is light. And in West Side, from my understanding, there's no such thing as heavyweight or lightweight. You didn't say, a heavy load on the bar or anything. There's fast and slow, right? You have dynamic effort, which is your faster, but you have max effort, which is your stronger stimulus. It's not necessarily how heavy the weight is on the bar. It's about the force into the ground, and it's about the speed that you're able to move whatever weight is there, right? As you mentioned in relation to force velocity curve, I can train high force isometrically. ISOs are great for that. But it's not just about hitting the high force. It's also about the continuum as we start to move things faster. And it's not just a game of heavy or light. It's a game of fast or slow. It's a game of high force or low force, and so on that way.
Exactly. People don't realize. Louis told me that this is to change my whole way of thinking. People have a different perception of what strength is. You see a 300-pound bar, a bar of 300 pounds on the bar on the ground. Some people can move it fast. Some people can move it slow. And how is that possible? Because weights aren't measured in mass; they're measured in velocities. So someone that can squat 600 pounds or deadlift 600 pounds can move that bar at lightning speed. 1,000-pound deadlifting lifted it, it's like a feather. But you have a little child, they can't budge it. That's because weights aren't measured in mass, they're measured in velocity. So that's why, you have the velocities are different strengths. They train different abilities. So once I heard that changed my whole entire way of thinking, the entire way of thinking. So my kids, I tell them what makes you miss the weight is you can't move the bar fast enough. That's the exact key. You can't coordinate your muscles and your nervous system to move that bar fast enough. That's why it will not budge. And if it does budge and it's moving super slow and you made a sticking point, which is an isometric point, the bar will stop moving. It will go backwards, because you're not moving fast enough. So the key for anybody and all this to develop an athlete is to actually move the bar as fast as possible. That's contemporary acceleration training, according to my friend Hatfield. And so that's what you have to, and doing that, so if you train different parts of these strengths, you'll affect different areas of strength. Like, say, if you do max strength, it'll make your intermediate weights go fast. Your explosive power go up, just because you've continued the curve to the right. If you do a little speed, you'll be able to move the heavyweights fast. It's just kind of tied together. So that's one thing that people don't quite understand, but you think about the physics of it, it makes complete sense. If that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. And the other thing, as you were talking, I realized a lot of people emphasize, as you mentioned before, the concentric component to things, right? They like to see outputs. They like to see the speed. And don't get me wrong, I'm right there with them. However, sometimes in the rehab space, we tend to, or at least I tend to, put a little bit more stock into, you mentioned eccentrics and isometrics. I go in a little bit heavier on those because it's not just about the output, but it's about the capacity to display that, right? I think this is more of a Charles Poliquin thing than a Louis Simmons thing, but he breaks down the analogy of eccentric and concentric in relation to a jar, or water bottle, or whatever that way. And essentially the outside is the eccentric and the inside, whatever you're pouring into it, water, whatever, is the concentric. And essentially we have a case of a lot of athletes overflowing the concentric, the water spilling out the side, why they're getting hurt, but they have no eccentric capacity. So I think the point that you made before about actually training and loading the eccentrics heavily, I mean, we were talking about that before we even hit record. record, and why I love the West Side Athletic Training platform for that, right? It's the ability to overload the eccentric and build some ridiculously strong athletes that can pump the brakes instead of just produce force into the ground that way.
The thing about eccentrics, you see the force curve, it's only illustrated, most of the time you see this concentric part of it. But where it goes to the middle, where you hit the eccentric part, the left side is the eccentric part of it. And, you can lower 40% more than you can lift up. And so there's some benefits to that. Basically, eccentric is your body. It's your body's safety mechanism. It allows you to stop and absorb force. So if you jump off a building, if you have a high eccentric strength, you can stop yourself and not get hurt and walk away. That's those parkour people. Or if you're running down the field and you hit the brakes real quick, you can safely do it and stop faster than everybody. So that's part people don't understand. And I've seen kids run down the field and break and blow a knee out. They don't have the eccentric strength. It's the vice versa. So that's a very important thing to do. So if you're not training that, there's like 8 different strengths. If you're not training eccentric strength, you're missing the boat. I use a K-box and I use some slow eccentric, but I do fast eccentrics too. I do over speed eccentrics too. So I'm trying to hitting all those different things. If you do over speed eccentrics, when you change direction it gets the ability to stop. You can stop weights that, dropping quick. It triples the mass, and it's almost like an effect like overloading eccentric. So. And the love it just builds more robust actin and myosin. So that's a part that people miss out on. Now, when I do rehab, especially my K-box was my thing. A lot of eccentric overload or isometrics work. That's what we do. Because you're trying to remodel the tissue. The tissues, when you get hurt, there's first of all you have some sort of stretching of the tissue. You have a tear of the tissue, hope you're not. Or a bone break, the swelling gets in there, you have a loss of strength, you have a loss of mobility. And so what the best way to get strength back is eccentric and isometric. Once you get that swelling out of there, then you get the mobility back, you got to get this thing strong again to get to the playing field, dude. So that's where that West Side belt squat eccentrics could be money, where you take the heavy load, you can't get up concentrically on your own, lower yourself down slowly and push up off the rails, and the K-box is overloading you fast with high loads, and you have to fight out of it, So all that stuff is super valuable, when it comes to, and then the other thing too, the soft tissue, ligaments and tendons don't get much blood flow. So they take a lot of repetition method, which is part of West Side. You're building single joint exercises with a lot of reps, or you got to do it on long duration isometrics. To build the soft tissue, the muscles you got to build with the eccentrics, and isometrics. So those things those are very important, and that's part of the conjugate world. Conjugate is building. Those are strengths you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, 100%. And to your point on the eccentrics, I actually think this is an area where, I certainly made the mistake in my programming first out of school that way. I didn't load them enough, right? It's like we think eccentric is just slow tempo on the way down. It's like, no, there needs to be a load component because there's that existing deficit between eccentric and concentric strength. You mentioned it earlier. You said, the eccentrics are a certain percentage, 30, 40%, whatever it was, stronger than the concentric. And it's like, we can't load those the same and expect a good outcome. It's like, we have to find ways to put more load on the eccentric. And obviously you mentioned there's a lot of different components to the eccentric, right? Do we do it fast? Do we do it slow? Do we do high load, extremely high load? Do we use something like a flywheel? There's a lot of different ways to do it.
I even drop off high boxes, the 2 drops. That you to stop on a dead stop. I've had kids jump off I have girls jump off a 78-inch box. For them to stop on that, all the nervous system and the muscles to fire extremely intensely to stop. And that's another way to do it, is altitude drops for the that's shock training, plyometrics. Again, you have to be strong to do drops like that, but it's another level of it. That's what you're going to see in sports. When you're running, you come to a complete stop, you're falling out of the air in a basketball court, a volleyball court. I've seen where people had I don't have a force plate, but I see when people jump, they land. If that eccentric impulse is bad, they can seek if you have potential for a ACL or something like that because your eccentric strength is weak. So if you build that, you become more robust.
Exactly.
And you hurt to rebuild it back.
Building a more robust athlete for sure. And one of the other things I wanted to touch on is you have a framework for doing everything, right? And that's one of the things that, again, I really appreciate about the West Side Conjugate method is, you're not just throwing stuff against the wall, hoping it's going to stick. You have an actual plan behind everything. You know the direction it's going. You know what the session is going to look like. Yeah, there might be some adjustments, but
Correct.
especially in relation to the evolving stimuli and the changing of exercises that way, it's not so much as just grabbing random exercises and throwing them together and calling it a session. It's a method to the madness and understanding the progression, the regression, and also what type of stimulus is that exercise addressing, or what weak point is it attacking directly that way, right? So you mentioned about different types of eccentrics, for example. It's not so much as going right into fast eccentrics from day one. Some athletes need to build up to that, but you have a framework in place in order to get them there. Walk me through a little bit more about kind of the frameworks you've built around the conjugate method with your athletes that way. How do you progress them week to week that way with some of these different things, whether that be your max effort and dynamic effort days, and what those days might actually kind of look like as well?
So when I get an athlete, I always do an assessment.
Yep.
As any coach should. Because if you don't know where you're going, where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going to be going or how to get there. So what we do is, first of all, you have a base. And Louis said you need to have a base. If you don't build a base, like he said, the base is big. How big is a tripod? It's as big as the base. So you have to have a base. And to me, the base is your core, so to speak. You have to build I test hip flexor. I test, obviously, jumping, broad jump, high jump, long jump, abs, obliques, lower back, QL. If you don't have that built up, you can't put a bar in your back, in my opinion, because the spine can't stay neutral. Your spine has to stay isometrically loaded. You need to put a bar in your back or a bar in hands. If that ain't built up, you can't do nothing. So if an athlete, if a bare bone athlete coming in, that's the first thing. Now, I do want to work the legs, so I'll work single joint exercise. I'll work a glute ham. I'll work a hyper. You got to train the hip joint, hip extension, and train the hamstring at the distal and proximal. And then I'll do for my quads. I'll hit my belt. I'll do belt spot. I'm gonna put a bar on the back, or maybe goblet squat, and then I'm doing some calf work and some groin work and some hip flexor psoas work. But that's my base. Once they get to a base, I say I can do. I use a 45 hyper for my lower back QL base. If they can do rep for 5 pounds, then I can play bar in the back. And at that point, I can then actually test them, with strength wise, the bar. So, sometimes kids it takes a month, sometimes it takes 3 months, 4, 5 months. But once I can get them that base, I can again do true max effort. Once I get that base, I can actually go into it. Everything's relative. I've had if they're max, some of these kids their max is 125 pounds. We're gonna start at 85% of that. 85% and above is going to be somewhat max effort. True, it just had to be 1 rep, but you can do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like what Jim Wendler. Now and then I'm different though. I believe, like I said before, what makes you miss the weight is you can't move it fast enough. So I will actually do dynamic effort. I don't care if it's just the bar. We'll move that bar fast because it could be reason why you can't lift the heavy weight fast is you can't move it fast. And vice versa. The reason you can't move the barbell fast because you're not strong. So I'm working both ends of the spectrum. And so once I do that, I'm analyzing. I can truly analyze what the weak points are. I can analyze, like in the squat, I can say, okay, you can get to the bottom. You got some issues there. Maybe your hamstrings weak. Maybe your quads are weak. Hips are weak. Okay, you're getting up. You're stuck in the middle, midpoint. Quad, and so I'm going to analyze it. Maybe your knees shoot in. You're not. You got valgus. You got your glute medius are weak. So I'm kind of analyzing what I see now, And that's where I drive. Now, the Russians had special exercises. When they saw the real exercise, this flat bench deadlift or the clean, they designed special exercises to not the real ones, but similar variations to build the weaknesses they saw. And so that's where I kind of do, okay, you got this weakness, we're going to do this type of variation to fix those weaknesses you had. And then once I get to that level, and then going to the explosive side of things, you can drop off a box as high as you can jump up to. I believe it's like 10% to maybe 15% higher you can drop off the box. Kids jump off playgrounds all the time. So they can do plyometrics from the onset. They've been doing them when they're playing in the backyard. So, but that's my rule. Like, you can't drop off a box, but so high because you don't have enough force production or eccentric, capabilities to stop yourself. So if the kid jumps, he can jump like 15 inches. I'm not going to have him jump off a 36-inch box. He can't stop himself. But he doesn't try to do a depth jump. He'll hit the ground and his amortization phase will be so long, he might as well just lift. So that's how I kind of dictate what type of jumping and explosive work I do with it as well. And then once I see those weaknesses, I design special exercises for them. And then we'll go to the accessories to fix those weaknesses. It might be rear hand, it might be hyper, it might be belt squat, it might be a hip quad machine, it might be a leg press, it might be hip abduction, calves, whatever they need. That's what we're doing more of. Like, you're doing more hamstring work because you're doing more quad, your quads are weak. But my split is I do a max every day, and I do a dynamic every day, where I'm doing it could be 5s, 4s, and 3s, and 2s, 1s. And it's always above 85%. And it's based on velocity too. If you start to get speeds that are faster than 0.5 meters per second, you're applying more force than what's in the bar doesn't prescribe. It means you're not actually addressing strength. Then the bar's moving too fast. Louis said, "I got to slow you down. In order to get stronger, the strength is built through slow velocities. So as the velocities get faster, I add more weight to the bar. Oh, you hit 0.6. All right, let's go heavier. Like, I got to slow you down. Okay, now you're in 0.4. Now 0.3, we're getting stronger. Oh, you hit point. Okay, now readjust. Or you're tired, you're fatigued. Let's take some weight off. You're freaking hitting 0.2. The bar's about to be crushed. And then on the speed day, I'm trying to keep the velocities high. So the velocities drop. Okay, we're taking some weight off. We're moving too damn slow. Okay, now, you're strong. Damn, it's too fast. Let's add some weight. So that's how I kind of do it with velocity, and so, but it's always percentage based. But I'm kind of keeping on the path and painting between the lines using velocity with it. I have an old school Tendo, but that's what I use. And it tests readiness too. And then so that's how I kind of progress people up. Now, once my kids get maybe 5-6 months into it, they're advancing. We're hitting singles sometimes. We're hitting singles, and I do a lot of isometrics too. That's an actual shape. So I'm rotating all of these exercises, different bars, safety bar, cambered bar, straight bar, bars bar, different box heights, hill elevated, front squats, Zercher squat, belt squat, K-box squat, deadlifts, rack pulls, pin pulls, deficit pulls, That's the only way you can fix some of these weaknesses is by putting the body in different joint angles and different difficult joint angles to actually build strength in those different weak points. That makes any sense. That's how I kind of build my conjugate system around it. And I'm always doing jumping explosive work because again, the body's got to move fast, or even if for a weightlifter, if you don't move fast, you're stuck. You're going to be capped at a certain point. And for an athlete, you able to fast, you ain't playing on the field. That's what it comes down to because that's what to be measured, jumping ability and speed. So now for somebody injured, it comes valuable because now their weak point is probably their injury, or that weak point may become an injury. I had a soccer player had a weak quad, and then she was she was always doing the insert kicks from the sideline, and just overused. What happened to quad pop? And she was a doctor, and her quad doctor said the quad's weak. So, but that I knew that before she was hurt. I was trying to build out this. There's not enough time sometimes. So sometimes my kids will see positions for injuries. It's overuse stuff, but it's always stuff I've already seen. Cause I know them better than I know their weaknesses before they even they know it. And they go, Bird, you're right. Now my quad was weak, but they never, and if they come to me, they never see that. They don't even know, but they don't even know what's weak unless someone
But quick break, because if you're a rehab professional sick of burnout, this could be your answer. Engage Movement's blended practice model is a proven system built by Dr. Ray Gorman, a PT who walked away from the 55-hour-a-week grind and built a blended practice model that doubled his income while working less than 25 hours a week, and he didn't have to rely on the traditional way of selling sessions to do so. It's all about blending remote and in-person services, stacking monthly recurring revenue, and building a business that finally supports your life, not the other way around. This model isn't just theory. Real providers, including myself, are creating lives of freedom and flexibility without being tied to their schedule. And as a listener, you get free access to the complete training. DM my name, Dan, to @RayGormanDPT on Instagram and receive your free breakdown on the model. To your point, I mean, I can't tell you how many athletes I see that, are doing some kind of training that don't have the level of strength that they should, right? Especially, you mentioned the quad. For some reason, knee extension in particular, I see a lot of athletes that are just really weak here. And I don't know if we've just demonized the quad or what it is. But
I looked at that too. Like in the last 4 or 5 years, I've never seen kids with such weak quads. It's ridiculous.
yeah,
I never liked the leg. I just bought a leg press because of it. I'm like, I got it. Ammunition for quads.
yeah, leg press, leg extension. I still love hack squat, pendulum squat, all these different things. Machines have a strong place in strength and conditioning and rehabilitation. I don't think everything has to be quote unquote functional, like with a barbell or some kind of free weight. Like you can use different kind of machines that way, and even different kind of bars. You've referenced a ton of different types of barbells that way. I love thinking
when you load the body, if you load the barbell in the front,
yep,
search or a front squat, it's gonna hit more quad.
right.
Hinges on that. Now you load the bar in the back, it's gonna hit more glute and posterior chain. Obviously too, if you back squat on the box, you're sitting back, you're hitting more glute and hamstring. Now if you regular squat, the knee shoot for you hit more quad. So the safety bar is cambered forward, so it's now hitting more quad. Yeah. So the bar changes the length of spine, and the bar position where it affects the body. So and so that's why the bar rotation is key. If you use a straight bar, at a certain point, you're making some exercises fixed, but at a certain point, you're neglecting the other parts. So you need to move the bar around where the shoulders sit.
And what you just outlined is the exact reason I personally love the safety squat bar for myself, because I can push a lot through my quads.
Yeah.
So naturally, I love the safety squat bar. But that's something
that is my base bar. Like,
yeah.
I think it makes you have good posture, and it makes you good form with it. And it sounds crazy, but Jesse Hoagland invented from New Jersey, black man, and he said he had a basketball player. He's a power business, but his son was afraid to put the bar on his back, so he invented the pad to go around there. So his basketball player was 6'6", I think, to squat with, but he didn't, and he cambered the bar forward, but he didn't realize it was a great invention, because it helps the quads, it helps the spinal erectors. Like, so that's my base. To me, that's my favorite bar. I mean, if you listen to powerlifters, they should never you should never really use a regular bar. You should really use some sort of specialty bar. And I think the safety bar is, actually, Randy Huntington told me, he said athletes should use the safety bar. And more importantly, the transformer bar is best. But he said athletes shouldn't use a regular bar. And so I said, great. That's what I've thought for years. So I'm glad that's your thing you like to do,
Yeah. And I mean, big shout out to Fred Hatfield too, because the Hatfield variations, oh man, now we can add additional stability by holding on to something. And again, if our goal is one of those max effort days, I can get true max effort because I'm not limited by stability, right?
Lunge, or rest on your shoulder, you can hold on to the rack and overload yourself. So I love doing those Hatfields.
Yeah, the eccentric overload component. And again, the stability on the single leg component from an accessory standpoint. These are things that are staples in my ACL rehabs in particular, right? I think one of the big mistakes we've made in the PT profession in particular, I have no issues throwing us under the bus for it, is we talk about return to prior level of function. Well, prior level of function got that athlete hurt. Why are we just going back to where we were?
Right.
Why not blow beyond that? Why not build, again, a stronger, more robust athlete? Let's push way harder this time around so this doesn't happen again. And I think, again, one of the big keys to that is thinking outside the box and using some of these different principles we've been talking about. How do we get them stronger? How do we hit all the different things athletes need in a actual organized, systematic approach? And the other thing you brought up, the plyo incorporation, and you used the playground analogy, and I think that's perfect, right? It's not enough to just be able to move big weight and put high amounts of force into the ground. It's not enough to just be able to move forces fast. You also have to move in a ton of different variations that way, that GPP element, if you will. And that's one of the things that I feel like Westside really nailed on the conjugate side of things as well, right? Is there is a GPP element to this. It's not so much as just go in there and put out high force, move weight fast, move weight slow. It's also, hey, we have to build better movers as well. And I think that combination of max effort, dynamic effort, and GPP athletic qualities all coming together is exactly the formula for producing some of the best athletes in the world.
People don't realize the forces in sports is way more in the weight room. Like when you're sprinting, it's like 3 to 5 times body weight forces by the ground reaction forces. When you're jumping, it's about the same, So at a certain point, you have to prepare the body. All the way to prepare that body for that is strength. On the other end, you have to slowly progress jumping to jogging to sprinting to get used to those forces. So on the opposite of isometrics and heavyweights are dangerous. People don't realize their kids are out there pretty much out of shape, running and sprinting and playing soccer and basketball, football. They don't understand the forces they're exposed to that they're not prepared for cause these injuries. So really, the American Journal of Science said once your kids can play sport, they should begin training with weights to prepare them for these forces in these sports. And so when the athlete returns to play, that's why the strength is important. And also on the other side, the jumping, like small jumps, high jumps, you got to be good and they're moving laterally and stuff like so. When you go to change direction, the forces are, and eccentrically, when you go to change direction, the forces are incredibly high. The braking forces is just. So that's why you have to build a robust athlete doing in the weight room. You don't have that, you have nothing.
100%. And you have to have that kind of feedback loop and understanding of what it is you're doing with them. And is it enough, right? You mentioned that in relation to VBT, right? Sometimes the weight on the bar is not enough and they're moving too fast. If your goal is to get that true max effort kind of day, then you have to throw more weight on the bar. You have to throw something else into the picture that way. So having those kind of systems in place to give yourself the feedback of knowing, hey, is my programming enough or do I need to add weight on the bar? Do I need to take weight off the bar, right? Do I need to make them faster or slower based on those little changes that way? And, you also mentioned that you don't have force plates, and I'll argue that you don't always need force plates. If you've watched athletes move for over 20 years, you're going to be able to pick things apart. Force plates are great. They're nice, but they're not necessarily required in order to make progress, right? A lot of these methods, like we were talking about the Soviet era earlier, that was in the 50s when a lot of these things wasn't been thought about yet. So if they can get results way back then, you can still get results now, 70 years later down the line, without access to all of these things. You can kind of ball out on a budget, if you will.
I've been this for years. I can see what's slow. I can see what's fast. I can see where you're slow. I can see where you're fast. I know where you're weak. You just gotta observe. You gotta look and pay attention to the details. Film it. See where they're breaking down. That's why they did back in the day. The Russians. And so all you need is a barbell and a place to lift and a place to jump, and then you can actually get it done. You don't need a big budget to do this stuff. I did that back then. That's all I had. Just the simple basics, and that's really what you all need. You can get it done anywhere. I had a little period. I had to move out of my gym. My place got sold, unfortunately, but I had the bare bones. I still got it done, because I just needed a place to lift, a place to run, a place to jump. I gotta evaluate what I'm seeing with these athletes, as far as weak point speeds, what strength they're using. I'm pretty much good now. I can see it, look across the room. I can see how fast the bars move. I can call it out almost to a T. Oh, that's 0.7. Okay, that's 0.7, 0.68. I'm down like 0.05. I could tell what the speed is. So like Louis back in the day was the first person to use tendos in America. People realize. And what he did is he put one on the bottom for concentric and one on the top for eccentric, clock eccentric speeds. Mine does clock eccentric speeds. Because another thing too, it's a stretch reflex. The faster you come down, the faster you come up. So if you do that on a lighter weight, you'll see that happen. If you do it on the jump, you'll see it happen. So that's why I kind of look at this energy. But I can see it. I can see it when the person's out there moving down essentially fast enough. I know they're going to come up essentially fast. So, but that's another thing that people don't kind of realize, So. But again, after over years and years, you're nosing these you see so much movement, you guys just catch up and be previous to these things. That's why I'm always observing, watching what's going on, the speeds, what the weaknesses, what they need to do, all how they move, how they walk, how they gait. I'm always watching how they move and walk and jump, so I can see how they lift, so I can see what we need to fix.
Yeah, and these training implements are incredibly powerful. Like, so powerful that you can actually use them in predictive nature. So that was one of the things I talked about a long time ago, a few years ago, with Jared Bidney, who was one of my early kind of like exposures to the West Side method and velocity-based training and so on. He's doing amazing work down there in Georgia, and he was telling me about the squat speed ratios he developed, where basically he was able to predict what your 40 time was going to be based on how much you were squatting at a certain velocity. And the concept blew my mind, and he was able to use something in the weight room to tell you how good you were going to be at something that mattered a lot to athletes. A lot of the athletes at the time, and I still get athletes that are like this, they don't necessarily think that the weight room matters the most initially, and they don't necessarily love it, but they fall in love with it when they see the carryover effect to their sport. When they realize, oh my gosh, I'm so much faster, or they have those moments like you mentioned where they could have faced a potentially career-altering injury, and they're able to avoid it because of how strong and robust they've become from all the extra work that they put in. And I think, in addition to those things, there's a lot that sport will teach you, but I think the weight room teaches you other lessons and gives you complements to all the things that you learn from a team sport environment that can really take you personally significantly further, right? When we think about things like West Side, like obviously the training methods are phenomenal, but one of the things you got to respect about guys like Louis is it was a very open door policy. Like, if you wanted to come in and learn, you had the opportunity to come in, learn, see what they were doing, and so on that way. It's not like this was like hidden and secretive from the world. There was growth beyond and impact beyond just the training element that way. And I think the same is true in sports and athletics, and even in rehab situations. If you're a rehab provider working with an athlete, this is an opportunity to build a connection, a relation, and teach them lessons that they'll remember for the rest of their life, right? It's not just about, the speed of the bar, the weight on the bar. This is bigger than just sport and bigger than just the weight room at the end of the day.
Exactly. The people don't realize, the athletes don't realize speed's cousin is strength. So that's why you can't have men compete with women, because they all move. Women are just as graceful, if not more graceful, than men. But what separates them is they're just inherently stronger, by genetic reasons. But I'll tell you, the women lower body is fairly close, So once they realize I can hit the volleyball faster, I can swing the baseball bat quicker, because the volleyball is a weight, the baseball bat's a weight. The stronger you are, you can move that weight through space faster, and as well as your body weight is a weight. The stronger you are, you can move that body through in the air faster. You're a basketball player, you can dunk the basketball easy. If you're a soccer player or a football player, you can move around the field and accelerate quickly if you have more strength. So, some of these high-level females are as fast as faster than high school boys. You look at like Shelly Ann Fraser Price. She runs that girl runs like a 4.40. But you watch her in the weight room, that girl can trap bar probably about 400 pounds. And she weighs about 115. So you're seeing some. I got a state championship long and triple jumper, Natalie Walters. that girl can, she squatted 305 pounds at 0.35 velocity, you know, and so then she jumps on a OVR vertical jump, 29.7. And that's like an adjust up. That's 34 inches. And then she can run about, 20, almost 21 miles an hour. So it's just like, she's got capabilities like some of these high school boys got, so, but it's because she's strong, she can do northern curls like it's nothing. Boop, boop, boop. Super strong hamstrings, quads are strong, this, at that point, you can't have weaknesses to move that fast because again, speed's cousin is strength. And so it's tied together. So if you want to be good in the field, you had better be strong. But if you just click on the TV and you watch these soccer athletes, these NFL athletes, these tennis, like look at Tiger Woods playing golf. I mean, it's the answer's there. That Tiger Woods was so dominant because he was strong, but you can't do it on just technique alone. It literally told me it's sports is simple. It's mathematics. That's like knowing what reps to do and what intensities to do and all that stuff, and forces is biomechanics. That's technique, and it's biomechanics, mathematics, biomechanics, and forces there. So once you get all those things down, it's lights out. You know what I mean? Mathematics, physics, biomechanics. Excuse me. The physics is how much force you produce, how fast you can produce it. Biomechanics is your technique, The mathematics is applying the right loads and to practice your technique and your weight room work. And so you don't overdo it and then get injured at that point. So it's basically that's that simple. The best athletes have those three capabilities, And so that's why the conjugate system is great. On top of that, I believe once you do get stronger and have apply more force, you can your form and technique becomes easy to train. It's just that simple, Like a baseball player, that ball, you only have like 0.3 tenths of a second to react to a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. Now, if you swing the baseball bat at 105 miles an hour, you can actually move that bat in the right direction to hit off moving pitches because you're spinning. You have more time to react. You're just spinning. You can actually wait on the ball a little bit and swing faster. So and that's people don't realize strength enhances technique. So it's got to be done. If not, you're missing one piece of the puzzle. You have all the piece of the puzzle, it's lights out. It's game over. You become a professional athlete at that point. High technique, high explosive, high strength, and you're resilient at that point.
100%, 100%. I think a lot of the times, to your point, people move in weird ways or different ways because they can't produce force. So their body like moves into this non-optimal position, but that's where they're able to produce force. And I think that plays a role in the injury process and the rehab of it, right? Like a lot earlier in this talk, you mentioned about the valgus, and it's like, that's a position I definitely don't want my post-op ACL patient going into. Early on in the process, it's like, hey, we don't want to put too much strain through that graft that way. The other thing I feel like is we've talked about a lot of different implements, from types of bars to machines. And you mentioned Nordics. You mentioned a lot of different things that way. I don't necessarily think, and I want your thoughts on this, that there's like a bad exercise per se. I don't think that there's like one exercise that's like, oh my gosh, never do this. Like those are the types of things I hate to see on social media. It's like, it might not be the right exercise for the right person at a certain time, but that doesn't make it bad. Again, these are all tools in the toolbox. The types of bars, the load on the bar, the velocity of the bar, the machines, the implements that you use, it's all tools. It's not necessarily that the tool is bad. You might just be trying to hit a hammer with a screwdriver. You might just be trying to hit a nail with a screwdriver, right? You need a hammer for that. So understanding that sometimes it's more about the implementation of the tool than the actual tool itself, I think, is a huge learning point that I've come across anyways.
Yeah, knowing when and where to apply certain exercises is highly important. And what dose to apply too. So like, if you like, let's say like, you want to do a safety bar squat, if it's a great exercise, every exercise has positives and negatives to it. So that safety bar is going to build your side erectors, it's going to build your quads. It's going to, it's going to build your core up, The camera bar is going to shake a little bit. It's oscillating. It builds more core strength. But if you put that bar on the camera bar on someone's weak core, they're going to be destroyed. So, but on the other hand, you can use it lightweight to build stability in the core. So it's deadlifting. If you don't have if you're rack pulling, you're going to build the glute, and if you rack pulling from the knee though, the knee level, you're gonna build. It's gonna put a lot of pressure load back. So you have to know when and what loads to apply it, because everything is safe. You just have to prepare the tissue to be ready to be loaded. That's what it comes down to. That's why the repetition is valuable, because now after you've done your assessment through your multi-compound joint movements, now you can go back and say, okay, my back is weak. I better do these hypers, dude, or some 45 hypers, something like that. Or I better do some knee extensions. This quad is not good, and that's where you got to be able to assess things, because and then every exercise has its purpose and its place. It's just a matter of doing when and where. But they all have positives and negatives. They all change the physiology of the body. You just have to know when and where to do it and how much to do it, and then it could be dangerous, but then it could be beneficial when you do it. But I think to be all around it, that's why the conjugate system is valuable. If you're rotating these things around, you become robust and you're hitting everything, and you're not doing too much of one thing. Like I remember Jerry Bidney said, I see these certain tricep exercise, and it was good to build those triceps, but he wasn't building the medial hair. I think because in West Side you rotate different. You're doing tape presses, you're doing gym presses, push downs. You're doing small tissue, but he was doing one thing because it felt so good to get stronger. But he probably tore his tricep tendon, and so that's where But he said, "I messed up. I should have rotated exercises." So that's why the West Side system did it, because the one thing Lou would told me, says the law of accommodation is if you do one thing for too long, you can't get no better at it. And also, though, if you do one thing too long, you create more wear and tear on the joints or the muscles. So that's why you have to actually rotate exercises and actually change intensities to avoid the wear and tear on the body. So because everything works, but nothing works forever.
Exactly. And I mean, athletes are always finding new ways to move in sport. So why are we not giving them new ways to move in training as well?
Because there's so many different planes and different contortions you'll be into, and different forces and places of the body. You have to rotate things, because the body is every day is being challenged, so that's why you have to challenge all these different bars and different exercises. And again, because if you say like people will say the straight bar, it works for a while, but everything works, but nothing works forever. That will correct so many weaknesses. At a certain point, you're gonna have things that a straight bar can't fix. And so, or a regular deadlift, I never do regular deadlifts either. Sometimes it's a trap bar, sometimes it's with bands, sometimes it's on a rack pull, sometimes isometrically, like sometimes it's a reverse band. Like but we never do a regular deadlift. And I had this girl, Jocelyn, or Maddie Kelly. Maddie Kelly deadlifted 457 pounds, weighing 165. We never regular did a deadlift. We always did a variation, because we were fixing the weak points is building robustness in her glutes and her hamstrings and her quads and her calves and her QL and her arms or shoulder. I mean, everything had to be built up. But you couldn't do it just doing regular deadlifts. You would hit a plateau, and then so that's why you have to keep changing. If you don't change, you can't adapt. The body is super smart. Whatever you place upon it, it learns fast. It'll adapt quickly. You have to be changing these things. And that's why, but then once you make a change, you got to keep changing after a while, especially the higher level you get. In the beginning, you can save one thing for a while because they're so young and they're developing. But after a while, as they get older and advanced, you got to keep changing it to make them. You got to change to make adaptation.
That.
And that's what you're trying to do when you're rehabbing. You're trying to create an adaptation. You're trying to bring that tissue back to normal. If you don't stress it enough, you don't change things, it won't adapt. It'll take forever to get better. It might never get better. Some people don't rehab right, it'll never get better.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And that's one of the things I find is a lot of patients will bounce around between PT clinics and try different things because they're not getting the results that they're after. And a lot of the times there just wasn't enough load. There wasn't enough intent behind things, right? I get it. It's easy to just slap 3 sets of 10, same 10 to 12 exercises at everyone, but that doesn't get athletes better. That doesn't get them back. That doesn't get them stronger and more robust. You've got to be willing to think outside the box. You've got to be willing to push the envelope a little bit more. And if you
I,
truly want to,
I had an ACL lady 2 years ago, and when she came off the rehab, I'm like, golly, you still free, you're super weak. Like, what the hell is? How did they clear you? You know. So no worries, I got you. But what I did is I loaded it smartly though. I did a lot of sled work, forwards, backwards, sideways. That's how your body moves with the knee. And pumping a lot of blood flow and that the tendons and ligaments in the knee. A lot of sled work, a lot of mobility work, stretching, traction, range of motion, ISOs. We did single leg, eccentric loading, just, and the dad and he was 1 month, the dad was like, wow, the range of motion was better. The strength was better. I think she was pretty much running full speed in 5 months, 6 months, but it was like they were being so conservative. It's like, which is smart, but you train and you got to recover, train, recover. It's like training. And then you same range of motion, get a little range of motion. Okay. It's like a little beat up. All right, let's back off, ice it, get a little range of motion, a little more. But by the time, like, you can, if you be aggressive and smart, you can get these people along quickly. I believe I believe in ACL. So if you're really on your game, it should be like 5 or 6 months, dude. And you see, like the Adrian Peterson tore his ACL. He was so strong. When you're strong, you come back faster. He was back in 4 or 5 months. It was like, how did he do that? I think, what's the one guy, Julian Edelman, same thing, 5 months, But if you're on your game and you're being aggressive, you can actually move the ball faster. I think the people they slow play these rehabs because they're afraid to re-enter these people, but they want to get the insurance money too. That's another factor. Got that prescription last this long, they want to get everything out of it.
we could have so many conversations about the issues within the app space that way.
I got this one lady, nurse. Now she don't got to run down the field. I had her back in 3 months, dude. She broke down crying. She went to the PT. She's like, whatever you're doing is working, dude. Full range of motion, strong. You're done. She's back in 3 months, dude. And she broke down in tears. I'll never forget it. She was like, my God, I'm walking fine, no pain. I'm telling you, man. Like, so you plow these conjugate stuff to these people, dude. They get strong fast as an athlete, or just in life, just functional life. They can get back quicker and just have a longer, healthy life.
100%, man. It's game changing, and the effects that it can have, as you mentioned, are really revolutionary that way. And I think, it's such a great system to learn more about. Obviously, Westside has a ton of resources available online to help with that. But obviously, you yourself are a great resource as well for people, Brandon. And I know you've done a number of other podcasts with guys like Joel Smith at Just Fly, I think, a while ago. And different ones that way. So for people who want to find out more about you, the work that you're doing, and all the amazing things that you're up to that way, where can they find you at online?
They can find me. I don't have a website. It's crazy. I'm kind of like, underground like Louis was. But I'm on social media. So I got a Twitter, I got a Instagram, and a Snapchat. And so it's Birds, and Facebook. It's Byrd Sports Performance. Just type that in, you'll find me. You can message me. I'm pretty approachable, and I'm pretty easy to find. And I like to answer questions. I also have a certification I do too, where I go into strength, speed, agility, mobility, rehab, and then I think I had about 20 people take it now. But it really goes into all this stuff in more detail. And it's not just conjugate. It's how do you understand all these things, So, that's available to people you want to. And it just you can go to my podcast too, the Byrd Sports Performance Podcast, which is out there, and you get a different perspective of different conjugate coaches and see how they lay out things too as well. So that's how you find me. You can hit me up anytime. I'm easy to get a hold of. So I like talking to coaches across the country and the world,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And we'll have to link to all of that in the description below as well. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there. And I mean, we could probably talk about this stuff all day long, dude. I know you're extremely knowledgeable and passionate about it that way, and I'm hopeful that a lot of people reach out to you because again, you've got a lot to offer that way. Is there anything we missed as we were talking or any other kind of closing thoughts that way?
I'll say this. When I went to the West Side the first time, I was seeing the heavy lifts. I was seeing the heavy deadlifts and benches. But what I didn't know was, Louis said, you go over there. You need to gun that machine, and it was that ATP athletic the belt squat. And I was like, man, I said, how do you get these people to jump so high and get strong? It's the sleds and that ATP. And so that thing will traction the spine. It'll put your pelvis in the right position, and it'll load you. It'll actually you can train on it and get actually strong without getting sore. So it's that's one thing when my kids get injured. That's where we start off at. We'd start off on that ATP marching. Marching is one of the things I love to do. And that's when I was like, man, I had to come here to see this. And then I bought my belt squat that day. So that was my first piece of equipment I ever bought. And that's the one thing I recommend. But the hyper, the same thing. Like all those little things I think people should get in as a staple. And that'll help you out because Louis said you train. This ain't the county fair, man. You're trying to get these people healthy. You're trying to get them strong and explosive. So you got to have some equipment. But if not, like Faye said, you can get a loading pin and a strap and knock it out. And that thing will keep you so healthy. It's isometric loading because it's quasi isometric because you're barely moving. So it builds robustness, bone density, the ligaments, tendons get built. So that's one thing we didn't touch on, but I wanted to get into. But that's one thing that's a staple of my program.
100%, man. Yeah, no, for sure. I love that. I love that. I will say, if you are putting together an athletic training platform, though, those things are a freaking beast. What are they, like 800 pounds or something like that? Like, it's a beast of a piece of equipment for sure, man.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, dude. Well, I really appreciate your time and all the insights that we were able to discuss today in relation to Conjugate and rehab, man. Thanks for everything.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.